Who would marry a homeless man just days after meeting him? Desperate to fulfill her dying grandmother's wish, Mia Taylor did the unthinkable. She married a stranger off the street, just to bring him to a family birthday party. What she didn't know was that Caleb Reed wasn't who he seemed. And the secret he carried would not only shatter her trust. It would change her life forever. Before we dive into the story, comment below where you're watching from. Enjoy the story, everyone. Mia Taylor didn't know what rest felt like. By 7 a.m., she was already darting between tables and juggling orders at the Sunlight Cafe, where she worked long shifts almost every day. Despite the chaos, she never skipped a small ritual no one else knew about, sneaking out back to bring food to a quiet homeless man nearby. During the short break between lunch and dinner, Mia packed a to-go box, hid it in her tote, and exited through the back alley. She found him where he always was, on the same patch of sidewalk, arms folded, eyes fixed on nothing in particular, like he was observing life from a distance. "Caleb," she said gently, crouching beside him. "Grilled chicken today. Comes with rice and broccoli. Hope that sounds okay." He slowly lifted his eyes, and a faint smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. "Definitely better than yesterday," he replied. "That rice tasted like drywall." She laughed as she opened the container. "At least it's warm." Caleb took the food with care, like the gesture meant more than the meal itself. There was a quiet dignity to him, too composed for someone without a home. He never begged, never complained. Strangely, he spoke with an ease and elegance that didn't match his worn clothes or the tattered blanket beside him. "How was the madness today?" he asked, taking a bite. A customer tried to argue that a pepper allergy deserved a free dessert. I nearly launched a pudding cup at his face. Caleb chuckled, a low, brief laugh. Mia loved making him laugh. It was rare, but when it happened, it lifted her day more than any tip. Just then, hurried footsteps broke the moment. Mia glanced across the street, and froze. There, with his arm around a blonde woman, walked Connor, her fiancé. They looked close. Too close. The woman giggled and ran her hand over his chest. Connor didn't hide it. He kissed her. Mia's stomach turned. "That jerk," she hissed, springing to her feet. "Wait, Mia," Caleb called after her, but she was already halfway across the street like a bolt of fury. "Connor," she shouted. The couple stopped. Connor turned, annoyance flickering in his eyes, as if she were some task he'd forgotten. "Mia, not here," he muttered. She almost laughed, disbelieving. "You're cheating on me in broad daylight and want me to stay quiet?" The blonde froze in place, eyes wide. Connor sighed. "You're blowing this out of proportion. Things haven't been great between us for months. You just didn't want to admit it." 3 years, Connor," her voice cracked. 3 years. You swore you were waiting on a promotion, that you'd introduce me to your parents. Was any of that real?" He gave a cold smirk. "I've grown, Mia. You haven't. You're still stuck in the same place. Just a waitress." His words landed like a slap. Mia felt the air leave her chest. "Let me guess, your family wouldn't accept me?" she asked, eyes stinging. A voice spoke behind her, calm but firm. "That's enough." It was Caleb. Barefoot, blanket folded under one arm, still very much dressed for the street, but something in his posture commanded attention. "And who are you?" Connor asked with a scoff. "The janitor?" "No. I'm a friend." Connor snorted. "Wow. Even your homeless buddy wants in on this." He sneered. "You should walk away before you say something that'll haunt you." Connor gave Mia one last look, full of disdain, then turned and left with the blonde without another word. Mia stood there, stunned. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was her mother. "Sweetheart, are things all set for this weekend?" Grandma Evelyn can't wait to meet your fiancé. You know how she is. All she wants is to see you married before. She trailed off. Mia swallowed. Yeah, Mom. Everything's fine. He's coming. We're doing great. That's wonderful, honey. She's counting the days. The call ended. Mia stayed frozen, blinking hard. You lied, Caleb said. I did, she admitted breathlessly. Grandma's always dreamed of seeing me married before her birthday. It's this Sunday. Caleb looked at her quietly for a moment. Then, in a voice so calm it almost startled her, he said. Marry me. Mia laughed, thinking he was joking. You're serious? She asked. Completely. Bring me to your grandmother's birthday. After 3 months, we can file for divorce. You keep your promise, and I help you out. The sidewalk felt frozen around her. It was crazy. Insane. But so was everything else lately. And Caleb was the only person who hadn't asked her for anything, not food, not money, not promises. You're homeless, she said weakly. Maybe, he replied, but I know how to treat someone with respect. That's more than your ex ever gave you. Mia stared at him like he had suggested jumping out of an airplane without a parachute. You're not crazy, are you? She asked, half joking. Maybe just enough, he said with a small smile. Mia folded her arms across her chest, still unsure if she was awake or dreaming. But why would you do this? She asked in a whisper. Caleb's gaze didn't waver. Because you fed me every day without asking for anything in return. Because I heard how much you care about your grandmother. Because maybe you need someone right now, and I don't mind being that someone. Mia bit her lip, her mind racing. Everything logical in her screamed no, but something deeper whispered, why not? Okay, she breathed. Let's get married. Caleb gave a small, almost relieved smile. And without making a big deal of it, the two of them turned and walked toward Everton Tower, where the city courthouse was located. The courthouse in downtown Willowdale wasn't glamorous, it was plain, functional, and, that afternoon, nearly deserted. Mia wore her faded café uniform under a second-hand coat. Caleb still looked like he could have walked off the cover of a gritty survival novel. They approached the front desk. We're here to get married, Mia said, trying to sound like she knew what she was doing. The clerk gave them a long, skeptical look before sliding a few forms across the counter. IDs, and fill these out. You're just in time for the last slot today. Mia's hands shook slightly as she completed the paperwork. Caleb's handwriting, however, was so neat and elegant that the woman at the desk did a double take. Within minutes, they were called to a judge's chambers. Good afternoon, said the judge, a graying man with weary eyes and thick glasses. Let's keep this quick. He peered at Caleb a bit suspiciously. Miss, are you sure about this? Mia didn't even blink. Absolutely. You barely know him, the judge pointed out. I know enough, Mia replied firmly. The judge shrugged and shuffled some papers. If you're both consenting adults, very well. With a few formal words and a ceremony that lasted barely 10 minutes, Mia Taylor and Caleb Reed became husband and wife. They left the courthouse with their marriage certificate in hand, feeling like teenagers who had just pulled off a prank. Mia was trembling from nerves. Caleb, on the other hand, looked remarkably at peace. So, she said, standing on the steps of the courthouse, what now? Now, Caleb said, we go to your place. We need to get presentable before meeting your grandmother, right? Mia let out a breathless laugh. I just married a stranger. Oh my God. I actually married a stranger. Caleb walked beside her, cool and casual. I'm a polite stranger, he said, and I know how to wash dishes. That has to count for something. Mia's small apartment was modest, a studio with an open kitchen, a sofa bed, and a tiny bathroom. She dropped her bag near the door, still shaky from the adrenaline rush. The bathroom's through there, she pointed. Caleb nodded, taking the clean towel she handed him. While he showered, Mia sat on the couch, buried her face in her hands, and whispered to herself. I just married a man I barely know, and I'm about to introduce him to my family. What am I doing? Before Mia could even gather her thoughts, she heard the shower water turn off. A few minutes later, the bathroom door opened, and Caleb stepped out, wearing only a towel around his waist. Mia's eyes widened in shock. Wow, she blurted before she could stop herself. Caleb raised an eyebrow. Something wrong? No, she stammered. It's just, you're definitely not starving. He gave a soft laugh. I stay active. You can stay in shape chasing buses and using park pull-up bars. Mia laughed nervously, trying hard not to stare at the lean muscles and defined chest now in plain sight. She quickly turned away, busying herself with her bag. Please, put on some clothes, she mumbled, cheeks burning. We need to leave early tomorrow, Mia said, throwing him a spare shirt and pants she kept from her brother's last visit. Grandma's expecting us. The next morning, still feeling like she was living someone else's life, Mia drove her aging car out of Willowdale toward the countryside. Caleb sat in the passenger seat, looking perfectly calm in a borrowed dress shirt and slightly too long trousers. Nervous? He asked, glancing sideways at her. Mildly panicking, she admitted, gripping the wheel tighter. You have an unnatural gift for staying calm in crazy situations. Maybe life trained me, he said, voice casual. She shot him a curious look. Trained you how? I've been through worse, he replied simply. She wanted to ask more, but before she could, her grandmother's house came into view, a cozy cottage with flowers overflowing from every corner of the yard. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney. They parked, and almost immediately, Mia's mom, Linda Taylor, came rushing out. Mia, she cried, pulling her daughter into a fierce hug. Then she turned to Caleb, her eyes warm but inquisitive. And this must be Caleb. So nice to finally meet you. He offered a polite smile. The pleasure's mine, ma'am. Grandma Evelyn's in her room, dear. Go on, take your husband to meet her. Mia's heart pounded as she led Caleb down the familiar hallway to a small bedroom where her grandmother sat wrapped in a cozy floral shawl, her frame smaller than Mia remembered. Grandma, Mia said warmly, I want you to meet Caleb. Grandma Evelyn peered up at him sharply. Her sharp eyes narrowed in recognition. Caleb, she muttered. That name sounds familiar. You're not that missing billionaire, are you? Mia froze. Caleb froze harder. Oh, Mom, Linda said from the doorway, laughing awkwardly. You must be thinking of someone else. Mia didn't marry a billionaire. Caleb kept his face calm, but inside he was reeling. Grandma Evelyn tilted her head slightly, squinting harder at him, as if she was pulling dusty memories from the attic of her mind. You're right, Caleb said smoothly. Must be a mix-up. Maybe, Grandma Evelyn muttered, but she didn't look entirely convinced. Those eyes, though, hard to forget. Mia hurried to change the subject, taking her grandmother's hand gently. Grandma, everything's fine. Caleb's new around here. You're just mixing things up. Finally, Grandma Evelyn relaxed, giving a soft, sweet smile. You're right, dear. My mind plays tricks on me nowadays. But Caleb couldn't quite shake the lingering intensity of her gaze. He knew one thing for sure. He couldn't afford to be recognized. Not yet. He seems like a good man, Grandma Evelyn said later, smiling kindly at Mia. If he treats you well, he has my blessing. Mia squeezed her hand. He does, Grandma, she said, and was surprised by how much she meant it. They soon gathered at the dining table, where Linda had prepared a small feast, roast chicken, buttery potatoes, fresh bread, and spiced apple pie. Eat, Caleb, Linda urged, passing him a bowl. Make yourself at home. He thanked her with quiet grace, serving himself carefully. His movements were refined, too refined. Mia noticed. So did Linda. You've got good manners, Caleb, Linda said with a chuckle. What did you do before you met Mia? Caleb paused for a beat, carefully considering his words. I worked in consulting. Helped small businesses grow. Took a break to start fresh, he said easily, his voice light. It was believable enough to let the conversation drift to safer topics. But Mia's instincts were already stirring. As they ate, Linda couldn't help teasing them. Mia mentioned you two met recently. Was it love at first sight, she joked, winking. Mia almost dropped her fork. Caleb smiled warmly at her. Something like that, he said. It was unexpected, but real. For a second, the world around Mia seemed to blur. The way Caleb said it, so steady, so sincere, made something soft bloom in her chest. She looked down quickly, cheeks burning. Well, as long as she's happy, Linda said brightly, topping off everyone's glasses. Dinner carried on naturally after that. Caleb answered every question just enough to satisfy without revealing too much. Still, every now and then, Mia caught herself studying him. The way he spoke about wines. The quiet confidence when he mentioned an upscale Italian place. The way he moved, polished, effortless. Not the life of a man who had truly lived on the streets. After dessert, Caleb insisted on doing the dishes, instantly winning more points with Linda. Mia helped her grandmother back to her room and tucked her in gently. Sitting on the edge of the bed, Mia asked quietly. So, what did you think of him? Grandma Evelyn gave a sly little smile. He's a good man. But he's not telling you everything. You can see it in his eyes. Mia swallowed hard. I know. Her grandmother squeezed her hand. But sometimes secrets aren't meant to hurt. They're just heavy burdens people carry. What matters most is how someone treats you. Mia kissed her grandmother's forehead, feeling strangely emotional. She realized she wasn't just scared of what Caleb might be hiding. She was scared of how much she already cared about him. Later, Mia returned to the kitchen, where Caleb was finishing putting the dishes away. You're surprisingly good at this, she said with a light laugh. I was a Boy Scout, he joked. Mia chuckled. My mom likes you. And Grandma didn't chase you out with a broom, so I'd call that a win. That's good, Caleb said, smiling. Now, we just have, what? 90 days left? Something like that, she replied, her tone playful but her heart heavier than she wanted to admit. They fell into a comfortable silence for a moment, standing side by the counter. If you ever want to call this whole thing off, Caleb said quietly, just say the word. I know, Mia said softly. But for now, it's working. As crazy as it sounds. And it was true. For reasons she couldn't explain, the chaos between them somehow made more sense than anything else in her life. They didn't talk much that night. Mia couldn't stop thinking about Caleb, the way he had defended her, the way he looked at her sometimes, as if she was something precious. She lay awake in her childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling, her heart a tangled mess. Meanwhile, Caleb was stretched out on the living room couch, hands behind his head, eyes wide open in the dark. He, too, couldn't stop thinking about her. Why had he offered to marry her in the first place? Why did it hurt just a little to think about leaving when this crazy agreement was over? Somewhere deep down, they both knew. This was no longer just about fulfilling a promise. Something real was starting to grow between them, even if neither dared say it aloud yet. The next morning, after hugs and goodbyes, Mia and Caleb piled back into her car for the drive back to Willowdale. Grandma Evelyn hugged Caleb a little longer than necessary before they left. Thank you for looking after my girl, she whispered to him. Caleb smiled softly. She's the one looking after me. The road back to the city was quiet. Mia stared out the window, lost in her own whirlwind of thoughts. Beside her, Caleb didn't push. He gave her the silence she seemed to need. But the air between them had shifted. The thread tying them together, what started as a wild plan, was tugging tighter, growing harder to ignore. And Mia couldn't help wondering. If pretending had already started feeling this real, what would happen when it was time to walk away? When they finally got back to Mia's apartment, she kicked off her shoes and collapsed onto the couch. "I'm exhausted," she said, stretching her arms above her head. "What about you?" she asked Caleb. "Me? I'm ready to cook dinner," he teased. Mia lifted an eyebrow. "You cook?" "Depends what you mean by cooking. I can handle omelets, pasta, and, well, omelets again." She laughed, tossing her hair over her shoulder. "Perfect. Omelets sound like a five-star meal right now." They crowded into the tiny kitchen. The space was so small that every move became an accidental brush of arms or bumping into each other, leading to soft, nervous laughter. Mia handed him a cutting board while she reached for spices. She paused as she watched him expertly slice the vegetables. "You have an interesting way with a knife," she said, curious. "Professional training?" Caleb grinned. "Let's just say, a lot of practice. Too much free time," she joked. "You could say life gave me a few unexpected breaks," he replied, his tone light but guarded. Mia didn't push. She sensed that whatever story Caleb carried wasn't ready to come out yet. They finished cooking quickly and plopped down on the couch with plates balanced on their laps. Some random romantic comedy played on the TV, providing background noise. "Look at this," Caleb said, pointing at the screen. "They hate each other, she trips, he catches her, and bam, they're in love." "The famous accidental romance formula," Mia laughed. "Real life's not that simple." "No," Caleb agreed, his voice softer now. "In real life, you fall, and sometimes no one catches you." Mia glanced at him, surprised by the heaviness behind his words. But when she looked closer, he was already focused back on the screen, hiding whatever was stirring beneath. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was loaded, with unspoken questions, unshed feelings, unfinished confessions. Mia felt a warmth bloom in her chest again, and no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't quite bury it under jokes or casual conversation. After dinner, they cleaned up in an easy rhythm, sharing the tasks like it was something they'd done 1,000 times. When they finished, Mia leaned against the kitchen counter, hesitating. "I work all day tomorrow," she said. "Should I take the couch?" Caleb shook his head. "No way. You need sleep too." They stood there, the distance between them suddenly feeling complicated. "All right," she said finally. "But if you change your mind, just wake me." She smiled, but her heart felt strangely heavy as she gathered the sheets. While Caleb went to shower, Mia quickly made up the mattress on the floor with clean linens and left a folded blanket nearby. When Caleb came out, he was wearing one of her brother's old t-shirts and a pair of athletic shorts. Mia tried not to look. She really tried. But it was impossible not to notice the way his hair was still damp, the way the cotton clung to the muscles of his arms and chest. She busied herself pretending to fix the blanket again. The lights went out, and for a long time, the only sounds were the city outside and the steady, slow breathing coming from across the room. Then, in the darkness, Caleb's voice drifted across to her. "Mia? Yeah. Do you regret it?" She rolled to her side, facing the back of the couch. "Regret what?" "All of it. The marriage, the craziness, me." Mia lay there quietly for a few seconds, feeling her heart thud against her ribs. "No," she whispered. "Not yet." A soft chuckle floated through the darkness. "Not yet," Caleb repeated, the words carrying a strange sort of hope. They both lay still after that. The city's distant hum filled the gaps between them, but it wasn't lonely. It was like something fragile but undeniable was starting to take root. Mia closed her eyes, her chest tight. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for now, she was here. And so was he. And for tonight, that was enough. Mia stayed awake much longer than she wanted to. She shifted on the couch, unable to find comfort, her mind running circles around itself. At some point, she got up and wandered to the window. She pushed the curtain aside and stared out at the sleeping city. The streetlights buzzed softly. Far away, a siren wailed and faded. Behind her, she heard Caleb's voice, low and rough from sleep. "Can't sleep." She shook her head without turning around. "My mind won't turn off." "Mine either." He joined her at the window, standing close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating off him. Their shoulders brushed lightly. Mia's heart leapt into her throat. She turned slightly, and found him already looking at her. His eyes were deep, unguarded, dangerously honest. "Mia," Caleb said, voice barely a whisper. She closed her eyes, instinctively leaning forward. Their noses brushed. For a heartbeat, everything else, the fear, the doubts, the crazy circumstances, disappeared. It was just them. Their lips almost touched. Almost. At the last second, Mia pulled away. "I'm sorry," she whispered, ashamed of the fear that knotted inside her chest. Caleb gave a small, sad smile. "It's okay. It wasn't the right time." Without another word, she retreated to the couch. She wrapped herself tightly in the blanket, her heart pounding. She didn't sleep. Neither did he. In the darkness, they both lay awake, thinking about what could have been, and what might still be. The next morning, Mia woke to the pale light sneaking through the windows. The mattress Caleb had slept on was empty. Her heart skipped painfully. Had he left? She pushed open the door to the small balcony, and saw him there. Caleb leaned against the railing, phone pinned between his shoulder and ear, his back to her. His posture was tense, the quiet, serious tone of his voice cutting through the morning stillness. "I know he's moving the funds through a holding account," Caleb said in a low voice. "I've already traced last month's transfers. One more recording and we'll have him." A long pause. "I can't return yet. If I move too soon, the whole thing falls apart. You know that." Mia froze. The man standing there wasn't just hiding from life, he was hiding from something much, much bigger. She backed away slowly before he noticed her. Her heart hammered in her chest. Holding account? Recordings? This wasn't a man restarting his life. This was a man on a mission. When Caleb finally came inside a few minutes later, he acted normal, maybe too normal. "Morning," he said casually, ruffling his hair. "Morning," Mia answered, forcing a smile. "You were up early," she added carefully. "Couldn't sleep," he said simply. Mia turned toward the kitchen, mechanically starting the coffee. But her mind was spinning. She thought she had already accepted that Caleb had secrets. She hadn't realized those secrets might be dangerous. And whatever they were, she was now tangled up in them too. After breakfast, Caleb offered to go out for a walk, to grab some fresh bread, he said. Mia stayed behind, alone in the tiny apartment, feeling like a stranger in her own skin. She turned on the TV for background noise, flipping channels mindlessly. She wasn't even paying attention until a business news report caught her eye. On the screen was a photo. A familiar photo. Her heart stuttered. There, in a crisp suit and polished shoes, was Caleb. Or rather, Caleb as she had never seen him before. The caption below read: "Disappearance of Caleb Reed still unsolved, missing CEO of Reed Capital Holdings." Mia's mouth went dry. She cranked up the volume. The reporter said, Caleb Reed, CEO and heir to one of the country's top investment firms, vanished weeks ago amid brewing corporate fraud investigations. Authorities consider three possibilities: foul play, voluntary disappearance, or a hidden whistleblower attempt. Mia dropped the remote. Her whole world tilted. Mia sat frozen on the couch. Her mind tried desperately to piece everything together, but it felt like trying to hold water in her hands. It was him. The man who slept on her floor. The man who cooked her omelets. The man who had married her with nothing but a kind smile and a battered backpack. A missing billionaire. When Caleb returned, a bag of bread swinging from his hand, he immediately sensed the change in the room. He set the bag down carefully. "Mia?" he asked. She stood up slowly, pointing at the television, the frozen news headlines still visible. "Is there something you want to tell me, Caleb?" He didn't pretend not to understand. "How long were you going to lie to me?" Mia demanded, her voice shaking. Caleb took a slow breath. "It was never supposed to be a lie," he said softly. "It was supposed to be simple. Temporary." She gave a bitter laugh. "Simple. You married me under false pretenses. You let my family welcome you into their home." "I didn't plan it, Mia," he said, stepping forward but stopping when she backed away. "I disappeared because my partner, Victor Hale, was stealing from Reed Capital. I needed time to gather proof. To fix everything without dragging innocent people into it." "You dragged me into it," she said, tears blurring her vision. Caleb's hands clenched at his sides. "And then I met you," he whispered. "And for the first time in years, I wasn't just running. I was living." Mia shook her head, blinking back the burning behind her eyes. "I trusted you," she said hoarsely. "I liked you." "I know," Caleb said, his voice rough with regret. "And I was going to tell you. I swear, I just needed more time." Her heart twisted painfully. "Time's up," she said, reaching for the door. "Please," Caleb said, his voice cracking. "Just leave," Mia said, her voice like steel now. He stood there for a moment, a million words in his eyes. But he said none of them. Finally, he picked up the bag of bread he had brought back and walked out without a sound. The door clicked shut behind him. And Mia collapsed onto the couch, the weight of what had just happened crushing her chest. That night, Mia didn't sleep. The apartment felt too quiet, too hollow. It was strange, how someone's absence could fill a room even louder than their presence. She curled up on the couch, staring at the marriage ring still on her finger. She had promised herself it was just for show. Just a favor. Just a trick to make an old woman happy. But it didn't feel fake anymore. Not even a little. Across the city, Caleb lay in a dingy motel room, his phone powered off, his heart heavier than it had ever been. He stared at the cracked ceiling, thinking about the moment Mia had slammed the door shut. Thinking about how he had ruined the one real thing he hadn't expected to find. 2 days passed. Mia returned to her shifts at Sunlight Cafe, falling back into her routine like a machine on autopilot. Smile. Serve. Clear tables. Pretend her heart wasn't in pieces. After her shift, she trudged home, tossing her bag onto the couch. But this time, something new caught her eye. A small white box sat on the kitchen table, alongside a plain envelope. Her heart leapt into her throat. She walked over, hands trembling, and opened the note first. It simply read. "I didn't come back for me. I came back for you. Not to ask for forgiveness. But to leave behind something that belongs to you. Always rooting for you. See." Inside the box was a simple silver ring, identical to hers. And a tiny keychain, a miniature bouquet of flowers. Mia sank into a chair, clutching the items against her chest. She didn't know what would happen next. But she knew one thing for sure. None of it had been a lie. The next morning, Mia stopped at the bakery near her building for coffee. The TV behind the counter was playing a business news segment. She glanced up absently. And froze. There, surrounded by microphones and flashing cameras, stood Caleb. Not in rags. Not barefoot. In a tailored gray suit, calm and steady. "And what about the fraud accusations within Reed Capital Holdings, Mr. Reed?" a reporter asked. Caleb's jaw tightened, but his voice was firm. "The evidence was turned over to the authorities today. Victor Hale will be held accountable for every dollar stolen. I disappeared not to run, but to protect what my father built. And today, I can finally breathe." Mia watched, unable to move. The man on the screen was Caleb. Different, but the same. The same man who had laughed with her over burnt omelets and slept on a mattress beside her couch. On her way home, Mia found herself drawn back to the sidewalk where she had first met him. The spot where it had all started. It was empty now. But near the corner, tucked against the wall, was a folded, worn blanket. Caleb's blanket. Mia knelt down, fingertips brushing the fabric. It felt almost sacred, like touching the first thread of a story she hadn't realized she was part of until it was already written. That night, back in her apartment, she did something she had been avoiding. She searched Caleb's full name online. Hundreds of articles flooded the screen, photos, interviews, business profiles. In one video clip from years earlier, a younger Caleb sat beside an older man, his father, she guessed. "My father always told me," Caleb said, "that trust is the rarest currency in the world. Once it's broken, it's almost impossible to earn back." Mia's heart ached. Because somehow, despite everything, she still trusted him. The next morning, when Mia opened her front door to leave for work, she nearly tripped over an envelope on the ground. Her name was written across it in Caleb's handwriting. Hands shaking, she opened it. "Today is the hearing that decides the future of Reed Capital. I don't know if I'll win or lose. But either way, I didn't lose my conscience. And I still dream about that almost kiss." See. Mia stood in the hallway for a long time, the letter pressed against her chest. That night, she dreamed of him. Not the CEO, not the man the world saw. But the man she had met on a sidewalk. The man who had smiled when she handed him warm food. The man who had looked at her like she mattered. In her dream, the kiss they had almost shared finally happened. No fear. No lies. Only them. Determined to distract herself, Mia spent the next afternoon wandering through Whispering Leaves bookstore. She ran her fingers along the spines of old novels, losing herself in their faded covers. Nearby, she overheard two women chatting. "And now he's back like nothing ever happened," one scoffed. "Typical rich guy move." "But did you watch the video?" the other said. "He looked different. Like he meant every word. Especially when he said he hadn't lost his conscience." Mia's stomach twisted painfully. She didn't want to hear his name everywhere she went. She didn't want the memories clawing at her. But when she got home, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You deserve to know what he did for you." Before she could reply, another message appeared, with an address and a time. No name. No explanation. Just a choice. Mia stared at her phone for a long time. Her first instinct was to delete the messages and walk away. To keep protecting her heart. But something deeper, something stubborn, kept her feet rooted to the floor. And curiosity, or maybe hope, won. That evening, she found herself standing outside a small office building in downtown Willowdale. A man in a dark suit with graying hair met her at the third floor. "Miss Taylor?" he asked kindly. She nodded warily. "My name is Greg Miles," he said. "I worked closely with Caleb for many years. He asked me to give you something if you ever needed to understand everything." He handed her a small flash drive. There's a computer inside. You can watch it alone. Take your time. Mia hesitated. Then, with a deep breath, she stepped inside the room and closed the door behind her. Mia inserted the flash drive into the computer. One single file appeared on the screen. Her heart pounding, she double-clicked it. The video opened with Caleb sitting against a plain white background. He wore a simple hoodie and jeans, nothing fancy, nothing guarded. He looked directly into the camera. "Hi, Mia," he said, his voice low and raw. "If you're watching this, it means I messed up. Again." He rubbed his hand across his face, clearly struggling. "I wanted to tell you the truth from the beginning. But I met you when disappearing was the only way to protect myself, and protect everything my father built." He swallowed hard. "And then, you. You gave me peace when I didn't even know I needed it." Mia sat frozen, tears burning behind her eyes. "I agreed to that crazy marriage plan because I thought it would be temporary," Caleb continued, voice shaking slightly. "But somewhere between pretending and laughing with you in that tiny kitchen, I stopped pretending." He smiled faintly, the smile that always made Mia's heart twist. "You didn't ask for anything. Not my name, not my money. You just saw me." He leaned closer to the camera. "I fell for you before I even realized it." Mia clutched the edge of the desk, trying to breathe. "I left this video," Caleb said, "because I know I may never get another chance to tell you everything. If you ever want to find me, I'll be waiting. And if you don't." He paused, pain flashing across his face. "Thank you for giving me the only real thing I had in a long time." The screen went black. Mia sat there long after the video ended. The silence was crushing. When she finally stepped out of the room, Greg Miles was waiting. Without a word, he handed her an envelope. "This is for you," he said quietly. Caleb arranged it in case things didn't go the way he hoped. Inside were official documents. Ownership papers for her apartment. "He wanted you to have something that no one could take away," Greg said. "Something that would always be yours." Mia shook her head. "I can't accept this." Greg smiled kindly. "He didn't leave it as payment, Mia. He left it as a thank you." Overwhelmed, she tucked the envelope under her arm and stumbled outside. That evening, Mia sat in the park near her apartment, watching the last orange rays of sunset dip below the skyline. Her phone buzzed again. A video message. The sender was just one letter, C. Hands trembling, Mia hit play. The screen flickered, and there was Caleb, standing at a window, city lights twinkling behind him. "I just wanted to show you something," he said softly. He turned the camera, and Mia gasped. On the wall behind him were dozens of pinned photographs. Mia laughing while cooking. Mia sleeping on the couch, wrapped in a blanket. Mia holding a coffee cup, smiling shyly at him. "I saved every second," Caleb whispered. "Because even if you never forgive me, you were the best part of my life." Mia clutched the phone against her chest, letting herself finally cry. 2 weeks passed. 2 weeks of Mia pretending she wasn't waiting. Pretending she wasn't hoping. The apartment felt different now. Too quiet. Too hollow. One night, sitting on the living room floor surrounded by all the notes, rings, and little mementos he had left behind, she let herself remember. She remembered not the lies, not the secrets. But the man who peeled onions at midnight. The man who slept beside her on a battered mattress. The man who looked at her like she was the only thing that made sense. Maybe she had been wrong. Maybe it hadn't been a lie. Maybe it had always been love. Complicated, messy, terrifying love. But real. And sometimes real was enough to build something worth fighting for. 2 weeks. That's how long Mia waited, even though she told herself she wasn't waiting at all. She worked double shifts at Sunlight Cafe, scrubbed every corner of her apartment, and tried to fill every second of her day. But at night, the emptiness crept back in. The mattress folded in the corner of her studio was a constant reminder. The missing mug from the cupboard. The silence where laughter used to live. One afternoon, while she was polishing glasses at work, her manager approached with a curious look. "Mia, there's someone outside asking for you." Confused, Mia wiped her hands and headed to the door. Standing there was a woman she didn't recognize, well-dressed, with dark hair tied in a sleek bun and piercing eyes. "You must be Mia Taylor," the woman said. "I'm Naomi Reed. Caleb's sister." The world tilted under Mia's feet. "What do you want?" she asked, crossing her arms instinctively. Naomi gave a gentle smile. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here because Caleb can't be." Mia stayed silent, wary. Naomi continued, her voice kind but firm. "He still thinks about you every day. He didn't disappear because he wanted to. He thought staying away would be the only way to respect your wishes." Mia looked away, blinking hard. "I didn't exactly give him much choice," she said bitterly. "I know," Naomi said softly. "And he accepts that. But he wanted you to have this." She handed Mia a small envelope. "It's an invitation to the Bright Horizons Foundation event tomorrow night. He'll be there. He doesn't know I'm giving this to you." Then, without waiting for a reply, Naomi turned and walked away, leaving Mia standing in the cold with her heart pounding. That night, Mia stared at the envelope for hours. Open it. Throw it away. Open it. Throw it away. Finally, with a shaking hand, she slipped the card out. An elegant invitation to the Bright Horizons Foundation Gala, held at the Willowdale Convention Center. Formal attire. 7 p.m. No promises. No explanations. Just a silent chance. She didn't know what she would do. Seeing Caleb again might tear her apart. But not seeing him. That already was. The next evening, Mia stood outside the towering glass building of the Willowdale Convention Center. The night air was crisp. Her nerves were even sharper. She wore a simple black dress, her hair pinned up loosely. She didn't look like the girl who had once served coffee and muffins. Inside, the gala buzzed with chatter. Tables overflowed with food, champagne flutes glittered, and polished businessmen discussed mergers and philanthropy. But Mia wasn't there for any of them. She scanned the room, and then she saw him. Caleb. In a dark suit that fit him like a second skin. Thinner than before. Shadows under his eyes. But still him. Still Caleb. Still hers, if she dared to believe it. Before she could lose her courage, Mia turned toward the appetizer table, pretending to study the cheese trays. And then. "You came," said a familiar voice behind her. Slowly, she turned. Caleb stood there, hands in his pockets, tension radiating from him. "I wasn't sure I would," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He smiled slightly. "Naomi, right?" "Yeah," Mia admitted. "She's a lot pushier than you are." Caleb chuckled quietly. "I didn't want to pressure you. I didn't even hope, really." "Then why are you here?" He hesitated. "Because even after everything, some part of me still looks for you everywhere I go." Silence. The noise of the gala seemed to fade around them. Mia took a slow breath, trying to steady herself. "You could have told me the truth from the start," she said, voice trembling slightly. "I know," Caleb replied, his voice thick with regret. "You let me walk away," Mia continued, her heart pounding. "You didn't even try to fix it." "Because fixing it would have meant forcing you to forgive me," he said quietly. "And you deserved the choice." They stood there, two people who had once built something fragile and real. Now standing on broken pieces. I would have listened, Mia whispered. I was angry. But it wasn't the end. I never stopped hoping, Caleb admitted. Even if it was selfish. I'm still hurt, she said, blinking back the sting in her eyes. But I also still remember, the way you looked at me when you thought I wasn't watching. And that, she realized, was what scared her most. Maybe we just need more time, Caleb said carefully. Maybe, Mia echoed, voice unsure but open. He hesitated. Do you still have the ring? Mia bit her lip. Then, slowly, she lifted her hand. The simple band still sat there, glinting under the chandelier light. I tried to take it off, she said softly. But I couldn't. Caleb's throat worked hard as he swallowed. I'm not asking for everything, he said. I'm not even asking for forgiveness. Just a chance. One day at a time. Mia stared at him, this man she had met in the most impossible way, who had shattered her heart and still somehow held the pieces. One day at a time, she repeated, feeling the fragile hope take root inside her. And for the first time that night, she smiled. A real smile. After the gala, things didn't magically fall into place. There were no grand declarations. No rushing back into each other's arms. Just small steps. Text messages in the mornings. Short visits to the cafe after Mia's shifts. Quiet walks through the city parks, where they talked about everything but the past. Caleb never pushed. Mia never demanded. They both understood that healing was slow, fragile work. Sometimes, Caleb would show up outside Sunlight Cafe with her favorite coffee, waiting without expectation. Sometimes, Mia would send a late-night text with nothing but a heart emoji, and that would be enough. Slowly, quietly, they rebuilt something better than what they had before. One chilly morning, Mia was setting silverware at the cafe when the TV caught her eye again. The volume was muted, but she recognized the scene immediately. A press conference. Caleb standing at the center of a sea of microphones. Her heart lurched. The manager, sensing her interest, turned up the volume. Caleb's voice came through, clear and steady. Today, I present to the public and the authorities the evidence collected over months of investigation. He placed a hand on the thick stack of documents in front of him. This is proof of Victor Hale's embezzlement and fraud. Reporters shouted questions. Caleb didn't flinch. I didn't disappear out of fear, he said firmly. I disappeared to find the truth. And now I'm standing here with it. Mia's chest swelled with pride, and something deeper. Something closer to awe. The cafe buzzed around her, but Mia stood still, drinking in every word. This was the Caleb she had always glimpsed beneath the surface. The one who fought for what was right. The one who didn't quit when things got hard. Later that evening, when Mia returned to her apartment, she found an envelope slipped under her door. She recognized the handwriting instantly. Maybe I did everything backward. Lied first. Ran second. Tried to fix things third. But now, finally. I want to explain it all. Can we meet tomorrow at 4 p.m.? At our place. If you don't come, I'll understand. But if you do, I swear I won't run again. See. Mia clutched the letter against her chest. Our place. The sidewalk where it all began. She closed her eyes, feeling her heart finally, slowly, start to believe. The next day, Mia's shift at Sunlight Cafe crawled by. Every coffee poured, every table wiped, every bell over the door made her heart jump. And when her shift finally ended, she rushed home to change. At exactly 3:50 p.m. Mia walked down the familiar street toward the place where everything had started. The sidewalk. The spot where she had first handed Caleb a warm meal. When she turned the corner, she saw him. Caleb was sitting there, not in a suit, not in disguise. Just jeans, a plain t-shirt, sneakers. Real. Uncomplicated. When he spotted her, he stood immediately, nervous energy radiating off him. "You came," he said, voice rough. "I did," Mia replied, hugging her coat tighter around her. For a moment, they just stood there, suspended between past and future. "Will you sit with me?" Caleb asked. Mia hesitated. Then nodded. They sat down side by side on the curb, just like that first day, when the world had been so much simpler. "I didn't think you'd come," he said softly, staring at the ground. "I wasn't sure I would," Mia admitted. "But I needed to see you. Not the man on TV. Not the missing billionaire. Just you." Caleb turned his head to look at her. And Mia saw it. The same eyes that had looked up at her from the sidewalk that first day. Kind. Hopeful. Real. "This is me," he said quietly. "No secrets. No more running." Mia swallowed hard, emotions tangled in her chest. "I was so angry," she said, her voice trembling. "Not just because you lied. But because I cared about you. And that scared me." She stared down at her hands, unable to meet his eyes. "It still scares me," she whispered. Caleb was silent for a long moment. Then, in a voice so gentle it almost broke her heart, he said, "I'm scared too." Mia's head snapped up. "I've built companies, faced lawsuits, survived boardroom betrayals," Caleb continued. "But nothing ever terrified me the way losing you did." He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a small, worn photograph. The one of them laughing together on her couch. "This," he said, holding it up, "is what kept me going." Mia blinked hard against the tears burning in her eyes. "What do we do now?" Mia asked, her voice raw. "We can't just pretend none of it happened." "I know," Caleb said. "I'm not asking for everything back. I'm asking for a chance to rebuild it. One day at a time. No promises. No pressure." He extended his hand toward her, palm up, waiting. Not grabbing. Not pushing. Just offering. Mia looked at his hand. Then at his face. And in that moment, she saw not the CEO, not the billionaire, not the man who had vanished and returned. She saw Caleb. Just Caleb. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. "Okay," she said, a tear slipping down her cheek as she smiled. "One day at a time." Caleb's entire body seemed to exhale, his shoulders finally relaxing for the first time in months. They sat there, hand in hand, while the city bustled around them, oblivious, uncaring. But to Mia, it felt like the world had slowed down just enough. Just enough to give them this moment. This beginning. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't flashy. But it was real. And sometimes, real was better than perfect. Sometimes, real was everything. In the days that followed, Mia and Caleb began seeing each other more often. Not grand dates. Not sweeping gestures. Simple things. Coffee at Driftwood Cafe near her apartment. Walks through the tree-lined streets of Willowdale. Sitting together on benches, talking about everything and nothing. Caleb never pushed. Mia never rushed. They built a new kind of rhythm, where trust was rebuilt with quiet mornings and honest conversations. He never stayed overnight. Not yet. But sometimes, he would show up at her door with a bag of groceries and a shy smile. And sometimes, Mia would find herself smiling just because she saw his name pop up on her phone. It wasn't fireworks. It was something better. It was real. One rainy afternoon, Caleb knocked on Mia's door holding 2 bags overflowing with groceries. "What's all this?" she asked, grinning. "A special dinner," he said proudly. "I promised I'd learn to cook more than omelets." She laughed and let him in. They spent the evening chopping vegetables, arguing over recipes, laughing when Caleb accidentally knocked a bowl off the counter. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't even very successful, the pasta was slightly overcooked, and the sauce was too salty. But it was perfect. When it was time to wash the dishes, they stood side by side at the sink, shoulder to shoulder. "This feels like a movie scene," Mia joked, rinsing a plate. "Which one?" Caleb asked, bumping her hip playfully. "The part where they almost kiss, but aren't quite ready yet." Caleb set down the plate he was drying. He turned to her slowly, his expression serious but soft. "I'm ready," he said quietly. Mia froze, the soapy water dripping from her hands forgotten. "Then kiss me," she whispered. Caleb leaned in, slow and deliberate, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. Their lips met. Soft at first, hesitant. Then deeper, as all the walls between them crumbled. When they pulled apart, Mia kept her eyes closed for a second longer, savoring it. Finally, she murmured with a breathless laugh. Caleb rested his forehead against hers, his hands cupping her cheeks. "You have no idea how long I've been waiting for that." "Me too," she whispered back. That night, for the first time in too long, he didn't leave. And the silence between them was no longer filled with fear. Only peace. Morning sunlight streamed through the curtains. Mia stirred, feeling the soft weight of Caleb's arm around her waist. For a second, she forgot the whole messy story, the lies, the heartbreak, the months apart. There was only this. Warmth. Safety. Home. She traced slow, absent-minded patterns along his forearm, feeling the steady beat of his heart. Caleb stirred, his voice thick with sleep. "Morning." "Morning," Mia replied, smiling. Neither moved, neither rushed. They had all the time in the world now. After a while, Mia whispered, "I was thinking. Maybe we could visit Grandma Evelyn this weekend." Caleb's eyes lit up instantly. "I'd love that. I owe her more than a proper conversation." Mia laughed softly, knowing her grandmother was probably already planning an interrogation. And strangely, Mia couldn't wait. They moved through the morning like they had been doing it forever. Caleb made coffee, burning the first batch slightly, while Mia toasted bread and sliced fruit. They bumped into each other, laughed, shared stolen kisses by the sink. It was messy. It was normal. It was theirs. Over breakfast, they talked about small things. Her shift schedule. His slow rebuilding of the Bright Horizons Foundation. A tiny bookstore Mia wanted to visit when she had a day off. They didn't force deep conversations. They didn't dig at old wounds. They just existed together, side by side. Before Mia left for work, Caleb caught her by the door. "Mia," he said, his voice serious. She looked up at him. "Thank you," he said simply. "For giving me another chance." She smiled, touched and a little shy. "Don't make me regret it." Mia moved through her shift at Sunlight Cafe with a lightness she hadn't felt in months. Even her coworkers noticed. "You've got that glow," one teased as Mia wiped down the counter. She laughed it off, but deep down, she knew it was true. She was happy. Not the loud, overwhelming kind of happy. The quiet, steady kind that made the world feel softer around the edges. During her break, she checked her phone and smiled. A message from Caleb. "Found a recipe for Grandma Evelyn's favorite pie. Think I can pull it off by Sunday?" She typed back. "Only if you want to impress her more than I do." That evening, she came home to find Caleb waiting with takeout from Driftwood Cafe and a mischievous grin. It was the kind of ordinary evening that felt like a promise. The weekend came quickly. Mia and Caleb packed up her old car, laughing as they wrestled a slightly lopsided apple cinnamon pie into the back seat. "You know it's crooked, right?" Mia teased as she climbed into the driver's seat. Crooked builds character, Caleb said solemnly, fastening his seatbelt. The drive out of Willowdale into the countryside was filled with music, bad singing, and too many inside jokes. When they finally pulled into Grandma Evelyn's driveway, Mia's heart squeezed. The house was wrapped in the warm smells of roasted vegetables and fresh bread. And standing on the porch, arms crossed and a knowing smile on her face, was Grandma Evelyn herself. "There's my girl," she called. "And you must be the pie chef." Caleb grinned sheepishly, lifting the pie dish like a trophy. Inside, the house was alive with warmth and chatter. Mia's mom, Linda, greeted them with tight hugs and immediately ushered them into the kitchen, insisting they try, just a little bit, of everything. Around the dinner table, Caleb fit in effortlessly. He answered Grandma Evelyn's probing questions with charm and humility, winning her over without even trying. At one point, Grandma leaned over to Mia and whispered, "He's a good one. You can see it in his eyes." Mia blushed, glancing across the table at Caleb, who was laughing with her mom about some childhood story. "I'm starting to believe you, Grandma," she whispered back. Later, after the dishes were cleared and everyone was too full to move, Mia and Caleb slipped outside into the cool evening. The garden glowed softly under strings of old fairy lights. They found a quiet bench under a gnarled oak tree. Mia leaned her head against Caleb's shoulder, feeling the slow, steady beat of his heart. Neither of them spoke for a while. They didn't have to. The silence between them was full of everything they couldn't quite put into words. Finally, Mia lifted her head and looked at him. "I don't know what happens next," she said honestly. "I don't know if we'll mess it up again. But I want to try." Caleb turned to face her fully, his expression serious but so full of hope it nearly broke her. "I want that too," he said simply. "More than anything." He reached for her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. It wasn't a dramatic vow. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was a choice. And this time, it was real. Weeks melted into months. Mia and Caleb found a rhythm, one that wasn't about fixing the past, but about building something new. He didn't rush her. She didn't hold him at a distance. They chose each other, day after day, in 100 small ways. Caleb kept his small loft downtown but spent most nights at Mia's cozy apartment, helping her cook, laughing over bad movies, taking Toast, the scruffy little rescue dog they adopted together, for long walks in the park. Mia, in turn, started taking a few hours off from the cafe each week to volunteer at the Bright Horizons Foundation, helping with small business workshops. They didn't need fancy declarations. They didn't need the world's approval. They had each other. And that was enough. Their life wasn't without challenges. Trust, once broken, took time to heal completely. Sometimes Mia would catch herself wondering if Caleb was holding something back, some shadow of his old secrets. When that happened, she asked him directly. And Caleb, true to his promise, never dodged. He answered, even when it was hard. One evening, over takeout pizza, she asked quietly. "Do you ever miss it? The old life? The spotlight?" Caleb paused, thinking. "Parts of it," he admitted. "The ability to make things happen on a large scale. But the rest? The endless meetings, the fake smiles, the constant pretending. I'd trade it all for a night like this." Mia smiled, brushing a crumb from his chin. "Good answer," she teased. But inside, her heart was glowing. He wasn't with her because he had to be. He wanted to be. One sunny Saturday morning, Caleb showed up at Mia's door with a mischievous grin. "Pack a bag," he said. She laughed. "For what?" "You'll see," he said, winking. Hours later, they were driving out of Willowdale, leaving the city's skyscrapers behind. They wound along tree-lined country roads until Caleb finally pulled over near a sparkling lake surrounded by pines. Mia gasped. "I used to come here as a kid," she said, amazed. "My mom would pack peanut butter sandwiches, and we'd skip stones for hours. Caleb smiled softly. Your mom mentioned it once. I thought, maybe we could make some new memories here. They spent the afternoon throwing pebbles into the water, laughing when Caleb's skips barely made it past 2 jumps. As the sun sank low, they sat on a blanket, watching the sky melt into gold and rose. As twilight deepened, Caleb shifted beside her. Mia, he said, voice suddenly unsteady. I need to ask you something. She turned to him, heart pounding. Caleb pulled out a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. Opened it. Inside was a simple, beautiful ring, nothing flashy, just perfect. I know we started this the wrong way, he said, searching her face. Married first. Fell in love later. Mia let out a watery laugh. I don't want to keep building our life on accidents, he continued, his voice thick with emotion. I want to build it on purpose. He took a breath. Mia Taylor, will you marry me again, for real this time? Mia felt her chest tighten with joy so fierce it hurt. Yes, she whispered, tears spilling over. Yes, Caleb, I will. Planning their second wedding felt nothing like the first. There were no rushed papers, no nervous glances. Just laughter, love, and the gentle weaving together of 2 lives already so deeply entwined. They decided on a small ceremony at Grandma Evelyn's house. The backyard was strung with fairy lights, tables covered in homemade dishes, wildflowers in simple glass jars. Mia wore a soft ivory dress, her hair loose around her shoulders. Caleb wore a dark gray suit, no tie, just himself. When Mia stepped into the garden and saw him waiting under the big oak tree, her heart skipped. Not because of nerves. Because this time, she knew exactly what she was walking toward. And he was smiling at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Grandma Evelyn, sitting in the front row with tears shining in her eyes, gave Mia a thumbs up as she passed. Linda stood next to her, dabbing at her cheeks with a tissue. The ceremony was simple. Vows whispered under the open sky. Promises made not in grand speeches, but in steady, trembling voices. When the officiant finally said, "You may kiss your bride," Caleb didn't hesitate. He swept Mia into his arms and kissed her like the world had melted away. Cheers and laughter echoed through the backyard. Afterward, they danced barefoot on the grass, Toast barking happily at their feet. The night was filled with homemade food, clumsy slow dances, and the kind of love that wrapped itself around everyone present like a warm, living thing. Mia had never felt so full. Or so certain. As the seasons changed, so did Mia and Caleb's life, gently, naturally. They settled into a little house just outside Willowdale, tucked on a quiet street where kids played basketball and neighbors waved hello. Toast quickly claimed the backyard as his kingdom, napping in the sun and chasing the occasional squirrel. Mia left her job at Sunlight Cafe to work full-time with the Bright Horizons Foundation, helping small businesses grow in struggling neighborhoods. Caleb scaled back his role at Reed Capital Holdings, choosing instead to focus on philanthropic projects. Their days were filled with messy breakfasts, grocery store runs, evenings spent curled up on the couch. Arguments still happened, over burnt toast or forgotten keys. But their fights were short, their apologies sincere. Every day, they chose each other again. Not because it was easy. But because it was worth it. One evening, as they walked Toast through a small park nearby, Caleb suddenly stopped. "Mia," he said, reaching into his coat pocket. She raised an eyebrow. "If you pull out another pie recipe, I swear." He laughed and shook his head. "No pies. Just this." He pulled out a second velvet box, smaller than before. Inside was a delicate gold necklace, simple and beautiful. Dangling from it was a tiny charm, a sidewalk engraved in miniature. Mia's heart clenched. "Our beginning," Caleb said, fastening it around her neck. She touched the charm with trembling fingers. "You always know," she whispered. He kissed her forehead gently. "I just listen," he said. "And I never want to forget where we started." Their second year together was filled with firsts. First weekend trip to a cabin in the woods, where Toast spent 2 hours barking at a raccoon. First real argument over whose turn it was to do laundry, Caleb surrendered by sneaking in chocolates. First holiday spent hosting their mismatched families, where Grandma Evelyn gave a toast that made everyone cry. Mia took on bigger projects at the foundation, mentoring young entrepreneurs, leading workshops at Willow and Penn Bookstore, and organizing community events. Caleb, meanwhile, launched a scholarship program for low-income students, quietly, without fanfare. They lived simply, loved fiercely, and learned every day that ordinary life could be extraordinary when you built it with the right person. Sometimes, Mia would catch Caleb staring at her like he couldn't believe she was real. And every time, she smiled. Because she couldn't quite believe it either. One spring afternoon, Mia received a call from her mom. "Grandma Evelyn wants to throw a big family party," Linda said, laughing. "She says it's time to celebrate everything." Mia grinned. "We'll be there." When they pulled into the driveway a week later, the backyard was already bustling with laughter, the scent of barbecue in the air, and fairy lights strung from tree to tree. Kids ran barefoot through the grass. Toast barked excitedly, trying to keep up. Grandma Evelyn, looking sharp in a floral dress and leaning on her cane, pulled Mia and Caleb into a hug. "You too," she said with a wink. "You're proof that even sidewalk stories can have the best endings." Mia laughed, blinking back happy tears. As the sun dipped low, she and Caleb danced under the stars, Toast weaving between their legs, family cheering around them. Later, when most of the guests had gone, Mia and Caleb sat on the porch, sharing a slice of pie. The night air was cool, and the stars blinked quietly above them. "This," Mia said softly, resting her head on Caleb's shoulder. "This is everything I ever wanted." Caleb kissed the top of her head. "You gave me that," he whispered. "You gave me more than I ever knew I needed." They sat there in comfortable silence, Toast snoozing at their feet, the scent of flowers drifting from the garden. The old sidewalk where they met felt 1,000 miles away. But it was still part of them. It always would be. And as they watched the stars, hand in hand, they knew. Their story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Years passed, but the love Mia and Caleb built only deepened. Their small house outside Willowdale was now filled with memories. Pictures lined the walls. A scratched dining table bore the marks of countless family dinners. The backyard, once Toast's wild playground, now had a cozy bench under a giant oak tree, their favorite spot for late-night talks. Toast, older now, spent his afternoons napping in patches of sun. Mia's work at the Bright Horizons Foundation blossomed, her workshops helping dozens of small business owners find their footing. Caleb stepped fully away from Reed Capital Holdings, choosing a quieter life focused on giving back. They weren't chasing headlines anymore. They were chasing moments. And they caught every single one. Life wasn't always perfect. They still argued, over laundry, grocery lists, whether to repaint the kitchen blue or yellow. But the arguments never lasted. They had learned how to fight for each other, not against. One Saturday morning, Mia caught Caleb elbow-deep in garden dirt, frowning at a row of crooked tomato plants. "You're terrible at this," she teased, laughing. He shrugged, brushing a smudge of soil across his cheek. "I'm learning. Isn't that the point?" She smiled, snapping a picture on her phone. That was what they had become. Two imperfect people, learning side by side, every single day. And it was beautiful. One spring afternoon, Mia's phone rang. It was her mom. "Grandma Evelyn wanted me to give you something," Linda said. When Mia and Caleb arrived at the family home, Linda handed them a small envelope. Inside was a letter, the handwriting unmistakably Evelyn's. "My dear Mia and Caleb. If you're reading this, it means I've gone off to dance with the stars. Don't be sad for me. I had a full life. Watching you two find each other was one of my greatest joys. Remember. Love doesn't need grand beginnings. Sometimes, it starts with a small kindness on an ordinary sidewalk. Keep choosing each other. Every day. With all my love. Grandma Evelyn. Tears slipped down Mia's cheeks as Caleb pulled her close. She could almost hear Evelyn's laughter in the breeze. That evening, Mia and Caleb decided to honor Evelyn in their own way. They packed a picnic and drove out to the lake, the same one Caleb had once surprised her with. As the sun dipped below the horizon, they lit a small lantern and released it into the sky. Together, they watched it drift higher and higher until it became just another star. I miss her, Mia whispered. I do too, Caleb said, squeezing her hand. But she's still with us, Mia added, smiling through her tears. In every choice we make. They stayed by the water until the stars filled the sky, wrapped up in each other and the memories that had shaped them. It wasn't the end of their story. It was just another beautiful chapter. Life in their little house stayed full and colorful. Mia's role at the foundation expanded, reaching into nearby towns. Caleb turned the old loft downtown into a community center, offering free workshops for teens interested in business and entrepreneurship. They built a life not measured by wealth, but by moments. Toast grew older, his muzzle graying, but he remained the heart of their home, trotting after them like a loyal shadow. Sometimes, on lazy Sundays, Mia would sit on the porch with a book, Caleb beside her, Toast snoozing at their feet. And she would think. This is it. This is the dream. Not fame. Not fortune. Just love, ordinary and extraordinary all at once. One evening, Mia found Caleb in the living room, holding another envelope. This just came, he said. Inside was another letter from Grandma Evelyn, sent posthumously. My dearest Mia and Caleb. Dance often. Fight fairly. Laugh until your stomachs hurt. And when the world feels heavy, remember. You started with nothing but a sidewalk and a little kindness. That's all you ever needed. I love you. Always. Grandma Evelyn. Mia wiped her eyes and leaned into Caleb's chest. They sat together for a long time, the weight of those words sinking deep into their bones. They didn't need anything fancy. They had everything that mattered. Each other. That night, they drove back to the lake. Without planning it. Without packing anything. Just instinct. They sat on the old bench overlooking the still water, the stars shimmering like 1,000 tiny promises. Caleb laced his fingers through Mia's. This is our story, he said softly. From a sidewalk to here. And beyond, Mia whispered, resting her head on his shoulder. They watched a single shooting star streak across the sky. It felt like a blessing. A reminder. That sometimes the most unexpected beginnings could lead to the most beautiful endings. And that love, real, messy, imperfect love, was the greatest adventure of all. Together, they smiled into the night, knowing their story had only just begun.